Quite many participants have joined. Respected speakers, faculty members, and teachers who have joined us today, good afternoon to all. I, Dr. Devjani Chakravarti, extend a warm virtual welcome to all on the second day of our 5-day FDP on Educators as Mentors, Enhancing Student Wellbeing through Counseling, organized by HGM Azam College of Education, Dr. P.A. Inamdar University. Yesterday, we had embarked on this enriching journey and learned about the terms guidance, counseling, and mentoring. We also learned how mental health and well-being are two sides of the same coin. Today, we have our another set of enriching session on conflict resolution and identification of issue by esteemed speaker Ms. Asmita Dalvi. But before we dive into the enlightening virtual session, I would like to invite Dr. Poonam Sonwane to introduce our esteemed speaker to all our participants. Ms. Poonam Sonwane.
Good afternoon to all. Asmita Dalvi ma'am is a RCI registered clinical psychologist who completed her MPhil from Central Institute of Psychiatry, Ranchi, specializes in psychotherapy for adolescents and young adults, dealing with problems of emotional and interpersonal nature. Over the last 6 years, she has worked in diverse settings in various roles as a therapist, supervisor, teacher, and consultant. She has carried out several workshops, outreach and awareness programs for teachers, primary healthcare staff, nursing students, and military personnel, sensitizing them to mental health issues prevalent in the community. Also, she has worked as a consultant psychologist in the social enterprises that met, which works primarily in the domain of adolescent sexual and mental health. She has also been a visiting faculty as Ferguson College and Symbiosis College. She is certified as an art therapist with accreditation from Indian Council of Professional Education Mission. She is currently pursuing her PhD in clinical psychology, working with adolescents exhibiting behavioral problems. She is also actively involved with LifeWell Happier Minds, a mental health facility in Hinjewadi, catering to the psychological assessment and interventions for corporate employees. She is an avid reader and enjoys creative writing as a form of expression. She has written blogs on mental health and for ThatMed and some other platforms. Welcome, ma'am. We are very eager to hear you. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Poonam, for this warm welcome. Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So we'll begin with today's topic, which is conflict resolution. I see that there's a lot of participants who are there online with me. So we will try to make it as interactive as possible within this large group. If you have any doubts, if you have any questions or contributions, please feel free to raise your hands or unmute yourself and ask questions. We'll proceed to the actual presentation. Just let me know if my screen is visible to y'all.
No, ma'am, not yet. Now it is visible. Yes.
All right. Okay. So we'll be talking about conflict resolution. I see that all of us here belong to the education field, and we're primarily dealing with adolescents and young adults. So that is a period of tremendous turmoil, and there are a lot of things that are going on in that developmental phase. So there are bound to be a lot of conflicts that might emerge, and we as mentors, or we as teachers, or as responsible adults have a role to play in how the children or the adults understand the conflict and try to work on the resolution. So before going to the resolution part, we need to know what conflicts are. So the flow of this presentation would cover four primary domains. One is the basic concepts of what a conflict is, what are the types of conflicts. Then we'll move on to what are the different causes that result in conflict among young adults. Then we'll be talking about certain prevention strategies. And you, as educators, as faculty, what would your role be in terms of conflict management or conflict resolution? So, here is a look at the basic concepts. First of all, we need to understand what a conflict is. Whenever there is a difference of opinion, does it really always have to be a conflict? So, what Anderson in a research had defined conflict as is the situation arising when interdependent individuals who perceive incompatible goals interact in order to gain something of value to them. So, here the basic principle was you need to have some underlying common interaction which would make any differences that you have more prominent of seeking a particular goal. Say, someone who's taken up science and someone who's taken up arts, they don't have anything in common among them, and they are conflicted about their studies. It's not a conflict between those two individuals, it is something that is happening internally between them. So, a conflict has to be in interdependent individuals who depend on each other, and a particular goal that needs to be achieved is not met as the result of whatever conflict is created. Then we have dispute. So, when a conflict is about a particular topic or a particular issue, then we say that it has turned into a dispute. So, students belonging to the arts faculty and the science faculty having this debate of who has more work, and that is a broader area of conflict between two streams. But when it comes to the time that they spent in college, and the talk revolves around that, and they're not able to agree upon something, then it would turn out to be a dispute. And a grievance is the formal expression of a dispute in the form of a complaint by one or more parties. So, a grievance is more of a formal representation, a complaint of what is the conflict about, what is the difference of opinion about. Now, are all conflicts bad? What do you think? Anyone? No. All right. So, a lot of you say that the answer is no. Of course, they're not. As you can see on the right hand side, there is this brief thing that we need to remember that normal, so relationships will have conflicts, and it's very natural to have those conflicts. The problem arises when we're not able to deal with those conflicts in an efficient manner. If we handle them positively, then they would definitely benefit us in growing and broadening our perspective. So, when we talk about the classroom and the conflict that comes up, we have to understand that certain aspects in the student's behavior or as an educator in your behavior would disrupt the teaching learning process. So, what are the primary domains where a conflict can arise? It can be between a student and a teacher, it can be between two students or groups of students, or it could be the entire class and the teacher. So, when we look at the causes, we will be better able to figure out where the conflict lies or how does the conflict emerge. But these are the primary persons or stakeholders concerned when it comes to conflicts. Looking at the different types of conflicts, so you have three approaches to look at a conflict. One is based on who are the people who are involved in a conflict, or rather, how many people are involved in a conflict. The second approach is based on the nature of the conflict, on what are the choices that we need to make. And the third is based on the resolution style of the conflict. So, when we look at the types, we primarily look at the first two approaches. So, the first one is based on who is involved in the conflict. As you can see here, there are four types of conflicts that come up based on how many people or who are the people who are involved. So, the first is interpersonal conflict. In interpersonal conflict, what tends to happen is there are two individuals with differing opinions, differing needs who don't get along over a particular matter or situation, and that results in them not agreeing to a common goal. That is your interpersonal conflict. Then you have the intrapersonal conflict, which, as you can see in the image, is within the person where different ideas, different needs seem to come together and clash. So, say someone is interested in pursuing psychology, but someone is also interested in pursuing economics, and someone else in some other stream. What do we choose? So, these are the kind of intrapersonal conflicts that the person would be going through. Then we have the intergroup conflict, where we have two separate groups with separate norms, with separate values and goals, who are moving towards one common goal, but who seem to have disagreements. And finally, we have the intra-group conflict, where within the group we would be having disagreements and disregard for the opinion of other people. Coming to the second approach to the types of conflicts, based on the nature of the conflict, or where we are supposed to make a choice. So, this conflict would in all probability reflect the intrapersonal nature of conflict, where we have to make a choice between options that are presented to us. So, the first one is the approach conflict, which can be very difficult to handle. So, when it comes to adolescents and young adults, if they have to hang out with friends or they have to go on a date, both of them are pleasurable choices and they have to make one choice. So that is your approach conflict, where the outcomes of both the options are positive. And that is likely to create a lot of confusion as to what do you want more. The second type is avoidance conflict. Here you are presented with am I audible? Someone
Yes, ma'am.
not. All right. Okay. So the second type of conflict, avoidance, is where you're presented with two unpleasant or not so positive consequences. So you have to study for an exam, and studying is in all probability not liked. And then you have household chores, which again a lot of us don't like. So both are unpleasant ones. Which one would you choose? The question being, which is more bearable? Then you have the third type of conflict, which is the approach avoidance conflict. Now, this seems to be easier in terms of making a choice, but more difficult in terms of implementing the choice. So, here you have one pleasant consequence and another unpleasant consequence. So, you want to hang out with friends, but you also have to study for an exam. You clearly wish to hang out with friends, but then what about the exams? So, choosing something that would have a long term impact is of utmost importance. And then the last one is the double approach avoidance or the multiple approach avoidance, where the two possibilities have both positive and negative consequences. So, say you want to choose between two subjects. So, in one, you have a very good teacher, but there's too much of work to be done. And the second one is where there's very little work or no exposure, but you can maintain a happy work life balance. How would you choose? So, these are the conflicts that a person might go through when they're faced with making choices. This third type is the conflict resolution style. We'll be talking about this more in detail when we discuss the actual conflict resolution. Just a brief is that there are four possible resolution styles with a fifth one, which is a combination of all the four styles. We'll look at what each style represents in the subsequent slides. Uh, any questions so far? All right, so we'll move ahead. We'll move to the causes of conflict. Now, when we think of a conflict, right, what are the things that come to your mind? What could the causes be? Of course, everyone has seen conflicts around us. So, what do you think the causes could be? You can put your responses in the chat bot as well. Differences in ideologies, strong opinions. Yes. Difference in perception. Yes. So, whenever we talk about a conflict, we're talking about differences. So, those differences could be as a result of different needs that we have, different values or ideologies that we have, and also different goals that we have. Okay. For some of us, the purpose of watching a movie could be fun, enjoyment, relaxation. For some others, the purpose of watching a movie could be learning something or a reflection of society. So, our goals from the act of watching a movie are different, which is why when we're asked to make a choice, we might not agree upon with every other person. So, these differences result in conflict. Now, when we say that there's a conflict, it can be big or small. It does not really matter because a conflict, no matter how small for us, might actually make a lot of difference to the person who's in that conflicting situation. You have to understand that a conflict arises when the person's basic needs are not met. The need to feel safe, the need to feel respected, the need to belong to a group or a place or a thing. So, it is very important that we understand that any cause of conflict cannot be uh, neglected or it cannot be belittled. So, as you can see in this pie, there are different basic domains in which we can divide the causes of conflict. First is the data conflicts, which talks more in terms of misinformation. It talks more in terms of the opinions that you hold based on certain experiences and how you interpret situations. So, say, you have students who uh, believe in one particular ideology, okay, that is based on their experiences. And you have another set of students who believe in a different set of ideologies because of the experiences that they have had. Now, the information that is available to them is based on their experiences, which is why it might be difficult for them to come to terms with the information that the other person is presenting, resulting in a conflict. Then we have interest conflicts, where there could be different interests that people hold closer to them, and based on that, they would have disagreements. So, the example of the movie that I gave, someone likes entertainment, action thrillers, someone likes romantic movies. So, these are conflicts that would come up based on interests. Then we have value conflicts. Now, value conflicts are a very difficult thing to manage or address because values form a very core part of our beliefs, which is why they're very difficult to modify. When two people with different ideologies come together, it might be very difficult for them to take up the values of the other ideology. Something that we keep talking about and hearing in the present times with modernization, the rift or the difference between the Eastern cultures and the Western cultures, their value systems. Now, based on these differences in values, how do we interact with the member of the other culture or member of the other value system is very, very important in terms of whether a conflict would emerge or whether we could get along. Then we have the structural conflicts. In structural conflicts, we have a power dynamics in every structure. So even in your class, even if it's a democratic setup, you would have to put in a framework for the students to follow, or else there would be a lot of chaos. So, in that system, when there is an unequal distribution of power, when there is too much authority on either side, and there is no control over how that power is balanced out, that is when the conflicts seem to emerge. Then the final cause is relationship conflicts. Now that has to do with how we interact with another member in any mutual interaction that we have. So, how is our communication? What kind of emotions do we convey? How do we convey them? How is our behavior constantly? Whether we are able to speak what we are thinking, whether we intend to say the things that we are saying. So, all of this would result in relationship conflicts. So, these are the primary causes of conflict. Uh, Now, coming to the cognitive processes that result in conflict. So, we've seen the broader situational causes. But for a situation to turn into a conflict, we need to interpret that situation, or we need to make sense of that situation. So, say, two students are fighting over which actor is good or which movie is great. Okay. Now, this is a general difference. One person says differently, the other person says differently, easily attributable to individual differences. But how does this turn into a conflict? It is based on the thought process or the meaning that we give that situation. And that meaning is subject to cognitive processes. So these are the few cognitive processes that you can see on this slide. The first one is self-serving fairness interpretations, which means whatever I am thinking is a fair part. It's that is the actual truth. This is the greatest movie. I know that. And there are so many people who love it. So I know it's the truth. So that is the self-serving fairness interpretation. That what I'm saying is a very valid, is a very well balanced opinion, which makes it almost equivalent to a fact. So that is your self-serving fairness interpretation. Second is overconfidence. Now, overconfidence in terms of saying that there is only one way to look at it, and that is my way, where taking different perspectives is almost impossible for the person. Then you have escalation, which happens as a result of catastrophization. So, catastrophization means there is the worst possible outcome is anticipated. So, say, two people are studying and they don't agree on some information that they have received. Now, the catastrophic consequence is if you actually believe this, then you are going to go nowhere in life. You're going to be a failure. It's the worst possible outcome to just that one possible disagreement is what could escalate into a conflict. Then we have avoidance, where we tend to disqualify all the positives in the conflict. That, there are three things that are positive, but there's two things that are negative. We focus so much on the negative that we discard whatever positives are there. Then blaming or name calling, where we label the other person as wrong, where we label the other person as not following what we want, and that could result in conflict. Then we have jumping to conclusion, where we tend to read the other person's mind, that they just don't agree with our opinions and they're mocking us. It's an assumption, we don't know for sure, but that could also make a disagreement turn up as a conflict. Last but not the least is emotional volatility and insults. So basically, here you are so driven by what you think that you might insult another person, or you might react in such a way where the other person might get offended. It's a part where you know, the thing that we say, because I said so. That is what emotional volatility resembles. Okay, so these are the common factors of cognitive processes in conflict. How would you notice if there's a conflict? Not all the students will overtly bring it up. Not everyone will start fighting or hitting each other. Conflicts can also be very subtle. So it is important to have a look at certain signs of conflict. Changes in body language. So the non-verbal communication would be overtly different, avoiding eye contact, having a lot of distance, interpersonal distance among each other, sitting cross-legged, cross-armed, being close to any kind of uh, communication. So all of that is the change in body language that would be visible. Then we have decrease in productivity, lack of focus, decreased interaction with others. So whoever we are in conflict with, there would definitely be an emotional distance also. We would avoid interacting with them. We would avoid any kind of a joint activity with them. We would give the silent treatment, then changes in tone of voice, and also performance deterioration. If we're able to look at a few of these together, then we need to clarify if there has been a conflicting situation that has come up. So, that is about the signs of conflict. Now, the question that we had asked initially, are all conflicts bad? So, they're not always bad. Conflicts can also be helpful at times. So, in what way are they helpful? They help in identifying problems. So, unless there is difference of opinion, we will never know that there is something that could be worked on, that could be improved, that could be achieved further. So, conflicts help us in identifying problems and accordingly make a plan to achieve new goals. They can make life more interesting, although only in healthy proportions. If we allow them to escalate, it won't be interesting any longer. But overall, minor conflicts that help us identify problems can help generate newer insights. So, that is where sometimes we promote healthy conflicts or the debates that we have. You know, they allow us to look for more things that need to be worked upon. They allow us to see different sides and they also enhance commitment. Now, how is that? So, when you have differences of opinion or when you are in the process of resolving a conflict, you tend to bond well with others who believe in the same system that you do. And that could bring all of you together and strengthen your commitment to each other and to the particular issue. Then we have the last one, which conflicts help in building relationships. So, as you get into conflicts, you get to know more about yourself and also about others. Now, this can only happen if you're openly looking at the conflict. And that is where your role, our role as educators, as facilitators, is very, very important. We can transform the conflict from a bad, unpleasant situation to actually helping the groups evolve. But how we do it, how we enhance that situation without escalating the conflict is something that is very, very, very important. So, let us now look at conflict resolution. What can be done to resolve the conflicts? So, before we do that, I would like for all of you to think of one particular conflict that you have either been a part of or you have experienced. Take a few seconds to think of it and make a mental note of it, please. And whoever is willing could also share it with everyone in the group. Would anyone like to share? Just one example is what I want so that we can look at the further topic with an example in mind. Yes, Zubeda? Zubeda, if you're trying to say something, you might have to unmute yourself. All right. Is there anyone else? Just an example of a conflict. Yes, Fiona?
Ma'am, if there are, like, for example, let's say there is a student who's difficult to deal with in
Okay.
terms of his or her regular, being regular in class or being attentive. Okay. And
Oh,
we as co-teachers have a difference of opinion on how to deal with a student like that. I think that is the most common conflict that kind of I face as a teacher in my day-to-day, dealings with co-teachers and students. So
absolutely.
the conflict is also between the student and teacher, and it is also a conflict with co-teachers as to whether the student has to be dealt with kindness or with being stricter. What is the right way to go about? There are millions of opinions, and we all have different opinions, and we all feel we are right, uh, to
Absolutely.
hold on to it. So that is a conflict I think I struggle with.
Absolutely. Thank you for this example. This is a wonderful example. Uh, so let us look at this example and try to see if any of the strategies that we are talking about would work in this example. Okay. Uh, so when we talk about conflict resolution, we need to keep a few things in mind. We have to limit our expectations. We cannot say that there would be no conflicts. or we cannot say that conflict resolution means that there is a clear cut answer and things are entirely sorted out. That is not how a conflict resolution works. We also have to anticipate what kind of obstacles could we face even when we are trying to solve a problem, and not get too involved in managing a solution. So, here, in the case that Fiona mentioned, if we take things personally, okay, that this other teacher thinks my style is wrong, then it is only going to escalate the situation. Or if we say that we have to come on one agreement and both of us have to be completely okay with that, then that is a very unreasonable expectation. And both teachers are experts in their field. Both the teachers are, what can we say, have their own opinions which have developed over time. They're not impulsive thoughts. So we need to anticipate what kind of counter arguments would also come. So we look at these 5 styles of responding to a conflict that we had looked at earlier also. In this diagram, as you can see, on the y-axis, that is the vertical line, you have the agenda or the goal. Okay. And on the x-axis, which is your horizontal line, you have the importance that is given to a relationship. And based on that, you have the 4 primary responding styles. Let us look at the first one, which is you give importance to the goal, but you also give importance to the relationship. It's like saying, I win, you win. This is where we cooperate, where we tend to see what the other person wants, we see what we want. Both the parties explain their sides, and then we analyze which of the choices has maximum benefits. Not that, there are benefits and there are no disadvantages, but analyzing and reaching a conclusion that, yeah, probably this has more benefits, let us do this for now. So that is your cooperative style of conflict resolution. Now, in the example of the 2 teachers not agreeing upon the way to discipline a child, right? Cooperating would be taking into consideration the preferences of both of them, right? So we have someone who says that, be kind, let the child make mistakes, and, we'll still bring about some change. And there's another teacher who believes in tough love. Like, no, we need to be strict so that the child understands right at the onset. So, what are the advantages of being kind? That the child is not emotionally hurt or impacted, that the child feels safe, that the child knows that he's being hurt. But the disadvantages, it's too time consuming. The change in behavior is not happening very quickly. But what are the advantages and disadvantages of tough love, of disciplining the child? That if you do this, you would be out of the class for the next 1 hour, or you'll be facing the wall, or whatever kind of punishments or consequences we're willing to give the child or the young adult. Now, there are advantages to this also and disadvantages to it also. Based on our analysis and the willingness of both the parties to agree on one particular option that would have maximal benefits. So maybe, being strict and showing immediate consequences, but the consequences could be of a softer nature, and appreciating the other positives that the person is doing would be a way of cooperating with each other, so that the conflict between the two teachers does not escalate and it does not go out of hand. The second type is more of directing. So here the importance is given more to the task or the goal, and less importance is given to the relationship. So in this, there would be one who wins, the other who loses. So, no, we will do it by putting in strict consequences, and I expect you also to do the same thing. There's no other way to this. So, that is a more directive style, which in the long run might spoil the relationship. Okay. Uh, then the third one is in terms of uh, low importance to relationship and low importance to the task at hand, which would result in avoidance. That we don't talk about this at all. We behave as if nothing is wrong. We don't address the conflict. We just do something that is entirely different. The fourth is harmonizing or accommodating, where more focus is on the relationship and maintaining the relationship, and low focus is on the task at hand. So it doesn't matter whether the child's actions change, but I don't want to get into a conflict with my colleague. So let me just say that, okay, whatever you say. So that is an accommodative style. And lastly, a combination of all the styles is the compromising one, where medium importance is given to both the task and the relationship. So both of them walk one step towards each other rather than only one person taking an entire leap. I win some, you win some. So that is how a compromise works. So Fiona, in the example that you gave, you might either have to cooperate or compromise, where you say that, when the child does these particular activities which are beyond a particular threshold, we need to use punitive measures. But if the nature of the behavioral disturbances is slightly on the lower end, then maybe a kinder version would help. So this is a compromise that both of you can reach, so that the conflict does not escalate further. Um, a few strategies that you can ask the person to follow when you are in a position to mediate the conflict. Ask them to take a pause. If it's you in the conflict, take a pause, take a breath. Once you calm down, then you try to express yourself. Use words very considerately. Always limit the conflict to the situation, not to the person. This is very, very important. Active listening. So don't listen to respond. Listen to understand what is being said. Identify any points that you agree on. So a conflict means disagreement, but there could be something one or two points that you could actually agree on with someone. Don't uh, forget to figure those commonalities. Identify the actual problem so that you can de escalate the situation. Limit it to the problem. Don't spread that problem to different areas of communication. So, say the problem is about how to, bring about certain changes in a student's behavior. Limit it to that. Don't attack the person. Don't attack their ideologies. Don't attack how they are with every other person. Then you are escalating to different areas. Prioritize issues, brainstorm solutions together, being creative to do that. Develop a short term plan together and agree to revisit later to see if it is working or not. Be respectful and optimistic. Get help from a neutral third party. So, now this last point of taking help from a neutral third party, when it comes to students or when it comes to a student and a teacher, you might be someone who would have to be the neutral third party. So, let us look at a few concepts that we need to understand in conflict resolution. So, we need to understand that when we are solving a conflict, we are basically bringing two people who have different perspectives together. We need to widen their perspective so that they're able to see the other side also. As you can see in this image, if you look closely, you can see a face. If you look from a little further away, you can see a vase. If you go further away, you would see both of them. And that is exactly what we need to do. We need to sort of create a wider perspective where both the opinions can be put together for the other person to see. So, how do we do that, or what are the ways in which we can try and resolve a conflict? First is negotiation. Negotiation would involve talking to the people involved directly, trying to resolve the conflict. We need to focus on what the goal is, what needs to be achieved, rather than who is saying that, from what place is that person talking, or what is the intention behind that. All of that is not what needs to be focused on in a negotiation. In a negotiation, you need to focus on what is the actual consequence going to be and how would that be implemented. So, making clear agreements as to the plan of action. That is where negotiation plays a role. Then we have mediation, where a conflict is resolved with the help of a mediatory or an intermediary. So, a third person, an objective person, would try and reason out with both the parties without being judgmental, without giving a biased opinion. And that third person will make sure that both of them are heard and both of them get an equal opportunity to represent their side. So, a mediator will only smoothen the process. They will not give anyone any opinion. They will not uh, try and do something that would uh, drive the content of the conversation, just the process. Uh, then we have conciliation. Conciliation is again very similar to mediation, Except in mediation, it happens face to face. In conciliation, a third person could talk to both the parties independently and put forward the other side's view so that it doesn't escalate the disputes. So, basically, in order to reach a point of mediation, a third person would first have to conciliate between the parties. So, in this example of the conflict between teachers, both of them are not willing to face each other. Okay, both of them are having difficulty even starting with a conversation. So, that part of getting them together at the same place at the same time with a common goal of resolving this conflict would be a part of conciliation. Once they come there and they start having an argument, that is when the person, the mediator, would have to smoothen out the process. Please, could we wait, allow the other person to complete, and then you could give your say. So, that is a part of the mediator's role. Facilitation has more to do with you trying to create a safe space where everyone can talk. You direct the conversation, you bring them back on track, and you make sure that everyone has an equal opportunity to give their opinion. Uh, so, active listening, like I said earlier, is more about hearing to understand and not simply hearing so that you can respond to it and give your opinion. So, this is one very difficult task that we need to learn. Due to shortage of time, I'll be running through a little quickly with the rest of the slides. Uh, Preventing conflict in the classroom. So, in order to prevent conflict, we first need to identify what are the sources of conflict or tension. Once we identify those, we need to have a healthy discussion of what are the expectations, what is allowed, what are the policies that you sort of endorse. So, all of this has to be made clear in the beginning. You build a network of relationships within the class where each person feels responsible towards themselves and towards other people as well. Now, this is a very difficult thing, easier said than done, where people don't see eye to eye to actually help them see something common and build relationships can get very difficult. So, here, your active listening, here, you trying to figure out commonalities is what would be of utmost importance. Then we have modeling appropriate in class behavior. So, if you disagree with something that a child has said, or if the child has said something wrong, how do you respond to that child? Or what do you say if there are disagreements? Do you yourself show bias? All of these things are directly or indirectly being observed by your class. So, modeling effective behavior is very, very important. Exercising empathy, taking into consideration the place from which the conflict has come to the other person's mind, is also something that is very, very important. And not just discarding it as something that is very trivial. Take action and don't neglect. Very important. Don't ignore conflicts just because we think they're not important, because then there is a chance of them escalating. Uh, what can be done when it comes to defiant behavior? So, make sure that you are able to understand the person's emotions Make sure that they're not transferred onto someone else who's just easily available. Make sure that insults are uh, sort of forgiven, or first there's an apology and then they're forgiven. And sometimes it can happen that students on purpose would push your buttons as well. So they'd be like, you also are agreeing with this person. This is what you said, right? So they can do that. Or sometimes it might happen between teachers. So it might happen that they're trying to provoke a reaction. Make sure you stay in control. How can we actually stay in control? Identify the loopholes, identify what could be said, anticipate certain things that could come up in the time of conflict resolution, try to address that. Uh, Try to make deals that are beneficial for both the parties. It cannot be one sided. When there is a rule that has been broken, complete disregard to authority, then you need to take proper steps to tell the person or show the person that it will not be tolerated. Sometimes we feel that we need to have the last word. It's not needed. Let them end, let them feel that they have control. Shift the responsibility to them to decide. Avoid asking questions of why. It might make them more defensive. Also, sometimes, certain actions of the students could create a rift between teachers. Make sure that you discuss it out. And if there is a refusal to comply to the norms by the students, then there has to be a united front to inform them of what the policies are. These are the values that we practice mediation by, or we try to resolve conflicts by. That things are kept confidential. You're not doing any harm. You're not siding up with someone. We're being impartial, avoiding any kind of a conflict of interest. So, if you think that there is an underlying benefit for you, please step out of mediation. Let someone who's more unbiased take it up for you. Practicing discrimination is not something that you can do. And support self determination. Let the students or let the people in conflict make decisions rather than you as mediators or you as mentors imposing it on them. Um, a few do's and don'ts, which basically talk in terms of an inclusive path where you take into consideration the differences that everyone has. You make sure that whoever is in conflict is well represented, and there have to be multiple members who do the mediating if there are uh, too many people who are involved. And the mediation or the conflict resolution services should be available to them at a time that is convenient to the involved parties as well. So, this is a primary introduction to conflict resolution. Do we have any questions?
Yes, participants, if you have any questions, you can ask. And ma'am, after question answering, if you want to take a 5-minute break, you can take.
All right, okay. Are there no questions? No questions is a very dangerous thing for any presenter. It's either because you've understood everything or you've not understood anything. And the latter seems quite dangerous to me.
No, ma'am, it is not like that. But I think whatever we face in general, it's very well put up. That's what I can say.
All right, thank you. All right, if there are no questions, then we'll take a 5-minute break and uh, we can resume by 3:40.
Okay, ma'am.
All right. Yes, Rajeshri?
Okay, okay.
All right. Should we begin?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay. So the next topic that I'll be talking about is the identification of issues. The age range that we're talking about is late adolescents and young adults. So somewhere between say 16 to 20, 24 years of age, right? So we will be talking about the major transitions that come along when students get into their plus twos in colleges. Uh, Before understanding, uh, just give me a minute, I'll just put it to charge. Sorry. Yeah. So, before going into the issues directly, we need to understand what phase of development are these youngsters in. Uh, so, let me just share my presentation. All right. So, the presentation is mainly going to follow these five important aspects. One is the psychosocial development that is happening in these youth. Then, what is the transition that takes place when students get into colleges? Uh, what this transition actually does, what is its impact, what to look for, what is it that we need to identify in these youth. And very, very briefly, I will just touch upon why mentoring is required. So, uh, like I was saying, um, these youth are in a very, very turbulent stage of their life. So, this phase is like a bridge between being children and being adults, which is why it becomes very crucial with the kind of changes that they're going through. So, the changes happen at all the levels, be it physical, emotional, social, psychological, moral. So, there is a lot that is going on at this stage. So, let us look at few of the changes that they're dealing with at this point. At an individual level, they are trying to deal with a new physical sense of self. So they've, you know, grown up, their body has evolved post pubertal onset. So they're trying to figure out, how their physical appearance, how their strength, how their overall presence is. Then there is also the sexually maturing body and the feelings associated with attraction and infatuation that they have to deal with. This is also a period where there is maximum cognitive development, where these young adults tend to develop abstract thinking, which is where they will try to make sense of what is happening. They'll derive meaning out of situations. They would draw inferences and uh, try to understand new concepts. So this is a very crucial stage when it comes to their thinking process, which is why the kind of experiences that they might have at that point could influence how they see themselves, what kind of a value system do they adopt for themselves. And last but not the least is they're trying to renegotiate relationship with their parents. So this is a stage where they're coming out of their comfort zone, coming out of their cocoons of the safe space of the family, venturing out into the open. So at this point, with so many changes, it really becomes very difficult for them to, you know, make sense of everything that is happening around them. So they are bound to be at a stage or a phase where things can be very, very overwhelming. So, along with certain individual changes, there is also the interpersonal development. So, at this stage, what happens is, like I mentioned, they're moving away from their home, which means they're going into the world at large. They're meeting people, they're meeting their peers, they're trying to gain insights from them, and somewhere they're trying to develop stable and productive relationships. So they will see what people around them are doing, they will try to learn something from it, they will cross check it with the values that they have learned at home. They'll try to analyze because their cognitive abilities are also improving. Based on what they see, what they like, what they think would be more useful, they adopt certain values and they accordingly get closer to a specific set of peers. Now, along with this, like I keep mentioning, they go into the world, right? What I mean is they start taking up responsibilities that are expected out of them as they're growing up. So now it's no longer, no, mom, I need this, dad, I need this, I want to do this, give me this. It's more about them making choices, them planning the steps to implement those choices, taking responsibility for the consequences of those choices. Now, again, uh, it may not be true with everyone because there are certain differences in the way they've been brought up, in the way expectations have been set for them. So, how does every individual's own background influence all these domains of development? Is something that you would be able to understand better when you mentor them or when you pay close personal attention to them. As educators, not as individual mentors to grow, but as educators, you can only look at the broader domains of development without actually knowing the details of every individual. But when you actually start with mentoring a student or a group of students, then you would move vertically in all of these domains that I just described to know that person better and to give them a very tailor made or a very specific uh, plan of action to move ahead with. Uh, so, along with these individual and interpersonal changes, there is also a change that is happening in the information processing. So, what does information processing mean? Any situation or anything that happens in a day, we process that stimulus and we give meaning to it and we act accordingly. So, that is the process of making sense out of information that is present in. So we have three parallel levels of information processing. We have the thoughts, what are we thinking? Our emotions, how we feel, and our behaviors, which is how we act. Now, say there's a lot of homework Okay, or there is an assignment which is due in 2 days. Okay, one of the students could have a thought that, oh my god, I'm never going to be able to finish it in 2 days. Someone else would be like, this assignment doesn't matter, it has only 5 marks. Someone else would be like, no, I've done my bit, I need to get good marks. So these are the thoughts that different people will have differently based on their expectations or their past experiences. Based on the thoughts, they will have certain emotions. For a person who feels that, they wouldn't be able to complete it in 2 days, come what may, they would be anxious, they would be in a state of panic. Someone who feels that it's not even important might be bored or might be carefree. Someone who is expecting a particular outcome for the efforts that they've put in, they might feel a sense of apprehension whether what I'm thinking will happen or not. So, based on these emotions, they would act. Someone who's bored will not even try to attempt completing it. Someone who's in a state of panic might try but sleep off because they're too uh, overwhelmed. Someone who is, apprehensive might keep on checking whether they've done it right. So, your thoughts, emotions, and behavior are connected to each other and they would drive a person to do the things that they do. Now, what happens in adolescence, or rather, which starts in adolescence, continues into young adulthood, and continues for life, is we develop certain ways in which we process information. The way our thoughts are formed based on certain situations. And that processing might involve certain errors. So these are the errors in thinking. So what exactly are these errors? Uh, One is all or nothing thinking. So somewhere where they would either believe that everything is good or everything is bad. The black or white thinking, as it is known. If I'm doing well, I have to come first in class, or else I'm a loser. That is your all or none thinking. Then you have a mental filter. So you very selectively pull out some things and the rest you leave behind. So, the teacher scolded a few students, okay, for their behavior or for something that they did. Now, one student might not notice that the teacher also appreciated him for something good that has been done, or the teacher still taught something that was supposed to be taught. All of that gets filtered, or that everyone else was there and it was a collective scolding. All of that information is left outside of his processing, and all they take is the teacher scolded me, the teacher scolded me. So that is a mental filter. Only selective information passes through. Then we have jumping to conclusion, wherein, the teacher just looked at me 2 extra seconds. She must be angry with me, or she must be. So these kind of assumptions that we make are very prevalent in young adults. Emotional reasoning, I don't feel like studying, so I won't study. Or what is this feeling of not feeling like studying or being tired or bored? It doesn't mean you can't, but you act according to your emotion as if that were the ultimate reality. That is your emotional reasoning. Labeling, as the name suggests, we put in certain labels to ourselves. Then we have personalization, where we take everything very personally, where we blame ourselves for everything. So the teacher said that, the overall performance of the class has been average, not that great. She must be talking about me. I must have done really poorly. That is personalization. Overgeneralization, where we use words like everything, always, never. So that is your overgeneralizing. Disqualifying the positives. Whatever positive you do, you will choose to ignore that. You will choose to discard that. You got, you got appreciated for something. And now the teacher was in a good mood. So everything positive is discarded. Catastrophization is thinking of the worst possible outcomes. And these unreasonable demands that everyone keeps making of our own selves, that I should not do this, I should come first, I should do my best, I must do this. So, all of these obligatory words create a pressure on us that seems unreasonable in the light of certain contexts. But these are the errors that we make without our awareness, which is why we may not even realize we are trying to think that way. But that is what actually seems to be happening. Now, this is something that happens commonly in young adults, and that colors their perception of situations. So, even if there is a neutral situation, if any of these errors is in play, they, without realizing, would only look at it from a negative perspective, creating a whole set of problems. Sometimes it can also work in terms of overconfidence, where only the good things are filtered in, all the harms are kept outside of their periphery of understanding. So I want to go out and hang out with friends, even if I have an upcoming exam in 2 weeks or 1 week. No, I'll have fun. I'll feel good. I'll have a very, rejuvenating experience, so on and so forth. Now, all the positives are taken in through the mental filter. All the disadvantages of not getting marks, of not doing well, not having the time to understand, anxiety peaking up towards the time of exams, all of that stays outside. And that also could create problems, or jumping to conclusions or labeling yourself. All of these are also things that could very easily distort their understanding of situations. So, these are the typical developmental features of a young adult. Now, coming to when they transition to college. So, there is already so much happening in their life at an individual level in the interpersonal context. When they move to college, be it their plus two, be it their graduation, there are a lot of changes because the extent of their horizon widens. So, what are the changes that we actually need to consider? So, like I mentioned before, when a student starts with college, they're out of school, they're out of their intermediate level, and they have a lot of colored ideas about certain things about college. They're very excited, they're very eager to try on this new grown up world, and they have these expectations of a different lifestyle, of the fun that they would have. Now, yes, of course, that is there. But along with that, there are a lot of other things that come up when they move to college. So they're prepared for all the excitement, but they seem unprepared or underprepared for a lot of other things that come with this move. The first among that is academic uncertainties. So, as we saw that they're trying to make sense of themselves. Now, in that process of making sense, finding out their own identity, they're trying to explore different possibilities. If a, if a decision is already made for them, okay, that okay, after 10th you do your 12th, then you're going to do engineering, you're going to do IIT, you're going to do medicine, or you're going to do law, or whatever it has been decided, and they lose out on an opportunity to explore their interests or their knowledge or their skills, then it could result in a lot of confusion. It could result in a lot of you know it's known as identity foreclosure, wherein they have no sense of who they are or why they're doing something or what it is that they're doing. Now, in that process, what happens is they're not prepared for what comes in academically. So, no, I want to do engineering. They'll get into an engineering college. But when the academics begin, they have no clue what they're doing. They have no idea how they will survive those 4 years. And that is where all that uncertainty comes rushing in. It's like, will I even pass? Do I even understand this? Do I even want to do this? Sometimes even the best students, they come in a larger pool of people. So every other person next to them is as good as them. And they don't know if they are lagging behind or everyone is at par. And the competitiveness that is there, it might just be too much for them to bear. So this might create a lot of pressure. So academically, they have to choose streams, they have to choose subjects, they have to choose a career, they have to decide on how their performance would be. Not that it could be implemented always, but setting up of expectations basically would happen here. Then you have the second thing that we need to consider is self advocacy. For now, they've been in a school where it was a very protective environment where they know everyone else. A college is a bigger, it's an ocean compared to the school tank. And in that ocean, there are several people with several differences. They need to present themselves in a way that is closely associated with who they are, but also in a way that they could belong to a set of people who they have liked or who they have come to know. So, this whole concept of presenting themselves, speaking up for themselves, and adjusting to peers is a very crucial change that is happening at this point. Because you have a whole lot of choices from which you have to see who you get along well with and accordingly get things settled. The other thing is about time management. It is so school was for a fixed time, and once you go there, everything was structured for you. But in college, that may not be the case. There would be several activities, there would be several things that you are expected to do in the same time. You have different subject submissions, you have co-curriculars, you have friends and peers, and you have so many other things. How do you manage time? How do you make time for everything that is important to you? All of this has to be taken into consideration. The financial issues, education is no longer very affordable. Getting into government institutions where it can be affordable again is a huge stressor. Moreover, this transition, this newfound independence, also doesn't allow them to ask their parents to do certain things. So they're looking for ways to look after their own needs. All of these changes would put a financial stress on students. Then, one very important thing, which again, I'm not sure if it's a disadvantage or an advantage, sharing of space. So you come in contact with several people with different ideas, ideologies, ways of living, and you try to mingle with everyone. So, yes, there is a loss of privacy, but there is also a lot to gain from the experiences that every other person has had. So, this is a very good uh, context to broadening your perspectives. But again, if uh, done in an unhealthy or a maladaptive way, it is more likely to create problems than help the person grow. So, while the students are transitioning into colleges, these are the primary issues that they have to deal with. Now, it's not easy being at that phase and having to deal with these issues because they can seem like a mountain. So, these are the transitions that they're going through. Now, what happens as a result of these transitions? What is the impact on their everyday situations? So, their grades could be affected. The deadlines that are set, they could be a cause of stress for them. There could be a communication gap. So, a lot of times, what happens is they're not able to express themselves. Something is happening, but I'm not able to point it out. That is what a lot of students come up with. I don't know, everything is fine, but I just don't feel so good. So they're not able to communicate with someone who would be able to understand them or who would be able to engage them in something that is more healthy. The biggest impact, which I'm sure would have been discussed in brief in yesterday's session also, the mental health factors that are, prominently affected. The most common thing that you will notice is anxiety. Anxiety is an emotional state where you are overburdened and overwhelmed with the uncertainties that you are experiencing. I don't know how I'll do in my exams. I don't know if I'll make friends. I don't know if my teacher would be pleased with my performance. I don't know if my parents would, be happy with what I'm doing. I don't know if my friends would be happy with the way I'm performing. So many things that are uncertain in their mind. And that surely is a cause for anxiety. Depression, again, there is a surge in cases of depression that we see in young adults, considering that they're going through a lot of change uh, and they have their own mental expectations. it becomes very difficult to reasonably satisfy those expectations. And that is when they seem to go into this state of depression. And we're not talking about a simple low mood. We're talking about the whole symptoms of depression that could emerge as a result of prolonged stress, as a result of prolonged anxiety or maladjustment. Uh, Adjustment issues are again very common in young adults because it is a period of a lot of changes. There are bound to be adjustment issues, and that's actually a very natural and healthy stage, which means that they're acknowledging that things are different from what they had been used to. Uh, Another impact of how this transition might affect them is in terms of engagement and connectedness. So, how engaged are they in the class, in the activities of the class? How well do they respond? How well are they in touch with what is happening around them? So, that also would be lowered. Motivation to come to class every day, to excel or to achieve their potential, that might also keep varying or fluctuating. Then we have the impact that it has on self-worth or self-esteem. Since this is their first glimpse of the world around them, what happens in that world is very, very crucial to how they start seeing themselves. And that is where, their idea about themselves is impacted. So they might start thinking of themselves the way people tell them about them. So say, someone calls a child, "Oh, you're so smart," and the child would suddenly feel very proud that, "Oh, they think I'm smart." Or if someone says, "What a fool you are, you don't even understand this," and they would start thinking of themselves in that light. So, a lot of these experiences have a very significant role in how they start seeing themselves. And lastly, engaging in risky behaviors. So, risky behaviors such as, resorting to substance use, getting into fights, skipping out on classes, um, engaging in rash driving, all of these are the risky behaviors that we could see when the transition doesn't happen smoothly or uh, they're not given enough supervision or guidance. Now, coming to actually identifying those issues. So, what are the red flags? What are the behaviors that we need to look for in these adults? So, this is just a partial list. There could be endless such things and more. But we'll just be looking at a few that you as educators can look for in your, students, so that the earlier we identify these problems, the easier it would be to get them out of it. So, what are the behaviors that you could see in people? Um when you see that a student is not able to adjust in their environment, they're staying aloof, they're not interacting much with others, they're very quiet, very accommodating of other people. Someone, can push them around. "Oh, I want to sit here," okay, they'll sit somewhere else. "No, let's not do this, let's go to the ground," they'll go there. So, a lack of social adjustment is one very important sign of them having certain troubles. Okay. Sometimes the way it is, reduction in their social interactions, there could also be an extension of it. Being over familiar, overstepping on others' space and boundaries, constantly nagging someone, being extremely pushy or dominant with others. So, social interaction difficulties could happen on either end, and both are signs to look for in terms of some kind of a difficulty that they might be having. Beyond their interaction with peers, also how they relate with the teachers, how their demeanor is with them. Sometimes they can be very meek, unresponsive, they'll not at all respond, be very shy, and they can be on the other end of the spectrum also, where they would be extremely dominating, trying to impose their views, arguing about things with teachers with regards to their differences, making sure that the teacher gives into certain things that they want. This whole sense of entitlement, that no, you have to do this, no, this has to be this way, no, if I have something it has to be answered. So how is their interaction with you as educators, with other members of the staff, is also very, very important in identifying the red flags. Bullying or being bullied, either of those could be things that are definite red flags. It is one very important thing that causes a lot of anxiety and a lot of cases of depression if it goes unchecked. So, these are actions that you can look for. Uh, then you have, extreme stress, which could come up as a disinterest in anything that is happening or whatever is being taught, in getting things done, disrupting others, disrupting the teacher when he or she may be teaching, anxiety, constantly second guessing their behaviors, not having the confidence to speak up, mood fluctuations, not coming to school regularly. All of these are the red flags that we need to look into. So, these are a few things that you would notice in your students, and if you notice either of that, it is always advisable to bring it to their notice. Sometimes it might happen that even they aren't aware that they're doing it. But if a simple talk doesn't, suffice, then we need to look for a proper intervention. Also, beyond this, there are a few harmful behaviors. Now, these were the red flags, and towards the end, if you see, there are certain harmful behaviors that they could be doing that you have to be very careful about. Their passive aggression, which is their non-verbal cues, their oppositional behavior, their defiance to what is being told, resorting to substance use, having certain self-injurious behaviors, hitting themselves, cutting themselves, hurting themselves. All of these are very, very significant when it comes to identifying if the person is well adjusted or not. So, these are a few things that you can take into consideration. This was a study that took place in Nagaland University, and it was done in the university students to find out what kind of behavioral disturbances were most prominent in the students. Um, Although this is a very limited sample study, it is still important to understand what are the most common things that happen when a child or a young adult starts college. So truancy was found to be the highest, followed by use of abusive language and talking in between or during the class. Then you also have being late, which was quite common. Um, and then there were some other problems also. So this study has a lot of implications in terms of what kind of strategies should we use to avoid these kind of issues. Uh, so that is about the issues that we need to look into. Now, very quickly on why mentoring. So, as educators, you play a very influential role in their lives. You spend a lot of time with them, you see them dealing with a lot of things that do not make head or tail to them, and you notice that they're not very well prepared by the previous experiences to actually meet the demands and the challenges that they face in the college, which is why it becomes very important that we as educators make it a point to see how they can be helped. So, I'm sure you must have discussed what mentoring is in your last session yesterday. These are a few activities that mentoring actually involves. So you can advise them, you can motivate them, you can provide training, you can make resources available to them, provide support, help them in developing and setting realistic goals, coaching them, and directing them towards success. So, all of this is a very, very important job. And as an educator, you are in a position where you can very well help those students with all of these issues that I very recently spoke about. So, considering that you would be mentors to your students, these issues are something that you need to consider when you start with the mentoring process. So, that is about the issues that need to be identified in young adults. Uh, I will stop my presentation here, and we could take a few questions if anyone has them. Neeraj, are there any questions? I think I see your hand raised.
Is there any doubt or queries regarding the topic? Please feel free to ask.
You could also share your experiences if there is something that you could connect to with what we discussed today. Yes, Dipali?
Yeah, in that slide, ma'am, on identifying issues, red flags,
Yeah.
in that there was a word crosstalk. What was that?
Right. Crosstalk is basically talking amongst each other while there is something that is going on. So it's more a part of distraction or being inattentive.
Okay. And also I had a question that these factors which you said are affecting the kind of behavior that they go through all this when there's a transition to college. So, is there a role which the parent or the teacher also plays in this, which leads to this some kind of a behavior, which is we are also are the adults also instrumental in this kind of behavior that they show?
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. So, basically, these past experiences that I keep referring to, they are a part of, how they have been raised, what has been taught to them in terms of the concept of right and wrong. So sometimes it happens that their views might not match with what they've been taught. Again, could create distress about how they feel or think about something and how they're expected to feel. So in that case, it would be beneficial if the teachers or the parents or those significant adults in their life could play a role in discussing their thoughts rather than simply putting in, values that have to be followed. What is the reason behind it? What is the rationale for that particular, thought is something that could be discussed with them.
Because many times when we are mentoring children, also we see that there is some underlying problem which was there before, because of which the child is behaving in a certain way.
Right. So we can always, so the part about mentoring is you have a lot of personal details also about the student. So you can involve those significant people who have been influencing the child's behavior, and you can, set up an intervention for all of them where possible. Where not possible, you can discuss with the adult or the adolescent what, could be the next best alternative that they could have.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Any other question? Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, ma'am. It was very enriching session. I'm sure all our participants will be benefited from this session. On the behalf of all participants and HGM Azam College of Education, Dr. P. A. Namdar University, I express our gratitude. Thank you so much, ma'am. And thank you all the participants for the patient listening. We will join tomorrow, and please fill the attendance form which is in chat box for the today's session. Please fill the form. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you all.
Thank you for inviting me here. I hope you had an enjoyable session. Thank you.
Ma'am, sure.
Okay.